It's rather like doing a crossword puzzle on which the positions of the black squares haven't been printed for you.
The really crucial thing that he did was to take Alice Cober's triplets, as he called them, and take a leap in the dark. He said to himself, well, look, what are these triplets likely to be? And he suddenly had a hunch. He thought, well, maybe they may be the names of Cretan towns.
And so he applied some values to a sequence of 4 signs, where he knew that the first sign was probably A. He didn't know what the second sign was. He thought the third sign was Ni, and he didn't know what the fourth sign was. But there's one place name, when written syllabically, Amnisos, which would be written A, Mi, Ni, So, in the syllabary, that fit that bill, and only one, interestingly enough. And he therefore suggested that the middle sign was Mi, and the final sign was So, which then allowed him to place those values into another sign group, Ko, No, So, Knossos.
The next step, he would take the ko from konoso, and it had long been posited that certain two-syllable words were the words for boy and girl. If he would have tried those out, he would have gotten ko-wo, ko-wa, boy and girl in Greek.
It was very exciting for him because he had all this unknown writing, and he was suddenly able to start making it speak. And very quickly he recognized that he was spelling words that were actually ancient Greek, as ancient as Chaucer is compared to, say, modern English.
Tiripa ene pode oboe. Dip ae mezzo e tirio we.
About 2 o'clock in the morning, suddenly the door burst open and Michael came pounding in and he said, do you want to be the second person in 4,000 years to read this script? And of course, I didn't say no. I leapt out of bed and we had a fascinating 3 or 4 hours until dawn as he explained to me how he was beginning to attach the Greek sounds to what he had thought previously was an Etruscan-based language.
He called me up on the telephone and said that he thought he had it. It was a stage in the progress toward the decipherment that I wasn't ready to take. I wasn't really willing to make a jump yet, but it was high time that he made the jump.
He was like a sort of volcano that had suddenly erupted and was allowing the lava to come pouring out, which had been stuck there for years before while he tried to find the way of getting it out. He was glowing with excitement and with achievement.
I remember my mother telling me that he had woken her up in the middle of the night to tell her that he'd cracked it, this thing that he'd been doing for ages. And then, of course, there was attention in the press and all sorts of hoo-ha.
During the last few weeks, I've suddenly come to the conclusion that the Knossos and Pylos tablets must, after all, be written in Greek, a difficult and archaic Greek, seeing that it's 500 years older than Homer, and written in a rather abbreviated form, but Greek nevertheless.
Listening to the broadcast was a young classicist at Cambridge University called John Chadwick.
Very quickly, I became convinced by 2 things. First of all, that the Greek that was coming out was not the sort of Greek which anyone knew, but was very much like the reconstructed Greek, which we knew they must have been using at such an early date. And secondly, by using the values that Ventris had given, it was possible to find more Greek words, and I quickly was able to check that these were ones Ventris knew nothing about at all. Now, if I was able to make progress with it, clearly the solution was beginning to work.
The two were to collaborate on all of Ventris's future work on Linear B. Chadwick had specialist knowledge of archaic Greek dialects, which enabled the decipherment to snowball on very authoritative grounds.
It was a very natural pairing, Ventris and Chadwick, because Ventris was the Sherlock Holmes figure, and Chadwick was the Watson, and As we know, Watson was the one who gets Holmes to explain what he's done, and sometimes helps him by asking the common man's questions, so to speak.
Ventris was grateful for an ally. He still felt that he was an imposter in the academic world and was relieved to have somebody with Chadwick's specialized knowledge to support the decipherment.
I think that it was greeted with a mixture of respect by some scholars and deep hostility by a small number who were quite jealous.
There were some who firmly denied the whole thing, and we had in Scotland a very adamant person who said the whole thing was crazy.
If the great Sir Arthur Evans couldn't do it, if the late Alice Cober couldn't do it, how could an architect decipher a script, especially one that looked so complex and complicated?
Doubts remained, but within a year of Ventris's decipherment, the American archaeologist Carl Blagan dug up 400 fresh Linear B tablets at Pylos on the Greek mainland. Here was an opportunity to test Ventris's decipherment once and for all.
One of the tablets contained little pictograms showing goblets and tripods. But what was really exciting, and Ventris was so excited he actually rang up Chadwick to tell him this, instead of writing him a letter, was that there were Linear B signs written next to these tripods and these goblets, which actually said T-repo in Linear B, and other words which they could immediately recognize were Greek.
It was just an absolute stroke of luck that in that campaign season, Blagan found texts that were so readily proved the decipherment.
On the 24th of June 1953, Ventris returned to the Royal Academy, where he had first seen the Linear B tablets, to give a speech about the decipherment. He was only 30 years old. The following day, the Times devoted a leader article to the news. Next to the leader was a piece about Edmund Hillary's conquest of Mount Everest, and the decipherment was swiftly dubbed the Everest of Greek archaeology. In the year of the coronation, and so soon after the Festival of Britain, the decipherment was yet another British triumph of international significance.
The impact of the decipherment, just absolutely colossal. It literally revolutionized the way we look at the Greeks.
It gave Homer's heroes, who lived 500-800 more years before classical Greek civilization, the civilization of the Parthenon and so on, it gave those people who had been silent. We didn't know their language before. We didn't know how they spoke. Suddenly, we could see their language, and once you can see the language through the mind of a man like Ventris, you can start to hear the language.
The second great accomplishment of the Ventris decipherment was overturning, finally, Sir Arthur Evans's view that the Greeks were simply colonial expansion.